Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, as always, Brian McNichol.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, and those dog-faced pony soldiers.
That's right. So weather's not been too bad. You've been getting in some golf, or
I did. I played one of the best rounds of my life last night. I'm glad you asked. I hit it good,
you're on a high note.
So the next time it's like, oh no, but yeah, it all I like had the feel for all the clubs of the rare moment. I also think so it was sort of misting, when I started, which sort of chases people off the course. So there was maybe 3 other people on the whole course golfing. So I was able to just zip right through it. One thing that really helps me in golf is, if I don't have to wait, if it's real crowded, I'm not as good a player.
So you're ready to join the live group, right?
Yeah, that's right. Less work for more money.
That's right. They're changing the PGA. That's for sure.
They are
the result. But anyway, also happy anniversary. So
thank you.
Number 19 is that what
number
it is?
19. Thinking about doing something special for 20 next year. But yeah.
Did we? I don't think. I think our special thing was really when we hit 30. Because I keep getting these memories keep popping up. That we were. We did our cruise that went to Venice and places like that. I don't know if they ever, after the pandemic, whether or not they ever put Turkey back into the cruise portion. But anyway, that was fun. But now I have just a low desire to travel internationally. I just don't think.
Yeah, I'm sort of like I haven't done a whole lot of that, so that's sort of things on my bucket list. But it's very hard to do right now, and I'm not sure I want to fly anywhere.
Yeah,
so, I don't know.
I'm not even. Yeah, I'm not. Considering all the travel I'd done in my life prior to the pandemic, now I'm kind of like I just. With fewer flights, and then overseas, there are flights, but they can be very expensive if you want to go to Asia and other places. And you're just kind of like, I don't know, do I really want to go through that? I mean, planes here are more crowded, fewer choices to fly, and you get a cancellation, and you who knows when you're going to fly next. And so I find flying to be just traveling like that to be a headache. But sometimes it's the best. It is the easiest way to get from point A to point B. You're not going to find me driving to Utah, so right. I'm going to fly. But I'm not flying anywhere near as much as I used to, and I feel somewhat relieved by that. It drives my wife crazy. I think she wants to go places, and we're not quite on the same page on that.
My wife's willing to fly at the drop of a hat, but not me. That's one thing. Like the 19 years though, like she puts up with a lot of stuff, like between the coaching and the work and the stuff on the internet and whatnot. It ain't easy being her, man.
No, I mean that's the thing. Our wives put up with quite a bit, right?
Yeah, they do.
we're lucky men.
That's
All right. So I mean, we have this ongoing slog, in Ukraine and Russia. But I thought it was interesting because Mitt Romney made a comment about all of this, where he's Putin's aspirations. He tweeted us, "Look beyond Ukraine. He's seeking to reestablish the old boundaries of the Soviet Union and bring more nations under his control. Ukraine must win the war in order to shed Russia's imperial ambitions and halt the rise of autocracy sway on the global order." I'm glad he said that. I mean, I think there's a lot of people thinking like that. Mm-hmm. I certainly have. There's no doubt. Post Trump, that Putin is trying to be very aggressive, and he does have this ambition of basically doing as much as he can to reassemble the old Soviet Union, right? So,
right. Yeah, I think Romney's perspective is exactly right. And he's been right about this all along. And of course, remember the great moment on the debate stage with Obama when he said, the 80s have called and they want their foreign policy back. He was right. Russia remains a threat, and Russia, is now pursuing, reassembling the Soviet Union. This is just a project, in the course of doing that, the Ukraine thing. So I go, look at this up, and CNN has a story about it. They're like, yeah, Romney was time to admit Romney was right about Russia, that it's our number one political foe. Well, it's like the Democrats are like, yeah, high five, number one political foe. Well, I mean, I realize y'all don't see China as a political foe anymore now that you're on its payroll. But like for most Americans, China right now is our biggest geopolitical foe. The other thing that Romney said that was interesting is like, sanctions haven't worked, right? The Russians, they have natural resources and other people need to buy them. And Biden has not been able to convince world leaders to truly put them in a box. And so they have all the money they need to do what they need to do. The Russians' problem is they don't have anyone to really pay it to in terms of soldiers, right? They're now, they're emptying prisons and so forth for soldiers. And they're not making any progress, right? They're still fighting for that one town, right? Bakhmut. Now, Bakhmut is in bad shape, but Bakhmut will get rebuilt one day. And I don't know about Russia's military capabilities because, they've really been reduced in this. They've spent a lot of money. They've spent a lot of hardware. They've lost, estimates range to 300,000, 400,000 soldiers, in all of World War II, we lost 155,000, and that was a much bigger, wider war. So now, the Ukrainians are loading up. They're trying to. The problem with it is it's a World War I style war now with trench warfare and so forth. So you have to have long supply lines, and you have to have one side kind of all to yourself of the supply lines, so you can keep moving things up and down and keep plugging holes and so forth. So, I mean, there's work to do on it, and it will tax Ukraine's resources. But the Russians, they're in for a fight here, and I think that Romney is right that it's important to keep the pressure on them, to keep making them spend all their money and all their soldiers and all their equipment. Yeah, it's but the thing about it is, okay, it may be militarily a standoff. But we can't accept the standoff verdict, right? You still got to get them out of the country. They don't get to keep part of Ukraine just because they attacked it.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think Bob's right that, I mean, right now it does seem to be somewhat of a stalemate, and there doesn't seem to be much on the horizon that would change that on the one hand, but that doesn't mean that we should accept that. We need, we have got to get them out of there. And, it seems, I guess, isn't the head of the Wagner Group? I mean, isn't he getting a little bit disillusioned with things that are going on there? I mean, aren't they struggling too?
Yeah, there was a story this week that he was selling information about Russian troop positions and so forth to the Ukrainians. I mean, you can't expect a guy who goes to prisons and mental hospitals to recruit his soldiers to be on the up and up, right? You're asking a heck of a lot there.
It's like I just want to know which way is the wind blowing, and who will pay me money or whatever, give me what I need. Right?
They are mercenaries. You get what you get with mercenaries.
Yeah, I don't know, that strategic alliance may not be working out too well for Putin here in the long run. Yeah. It's just amazing. Yeah, but I mean, this whole thing. I mean, as you mentioned, that the whole debate thing with Romney, going back. With Obama and all this kind of stuff. It's just that, when Romney says these things, it is a stark reminder of what he did back then, that, he was right then, he's right now. Yeah. And I realize that we still have, and we've talked about this many times, we still have a lot of Republican politicians that are not quite on this bandwagon. They don't want to keep putting money into this thing, but, I think they don't quite get the whole, global perspective of what this means if you didn't do this,
Right. But the thing about it is like, you haven't really heard much of those people lately.
Right.
They've sort of been drowned out. They've sort of been neutralized. And I think that's the right thing. People on the right were saying a lot of monstrously stupid stuff about this. And I think you're seeing less of that now. I think people are coming to realize that, yeah, you do have to stop it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. So hopefully things will move there. But I mean, what does that say now? 441 days. I mean,
Yeah,
it has definitely been a
3 weeks.
slog and a grind. I
Yeah.
mean, just this every day that this goes on, just makes you wonder exactly what's Russia going to get out of this in the long run, because we talked, I think, at the beginning, right? We thought it was a 2 or 3 day thing. That's what Putin was probably estimating. He'd just go in there, roll over, and he'd capture Ukraine. And it's been almost 450 days, since that time. I mean, he's stuck there. He's lost a ton of people. He's spent a lot of money, and he doesn't have anything to show for it
At all. That's right.
Yeah. So, and then I mentioned, that we had gone to Turkey as part of a cruise. It's been 8 years now, but we had a big election, big presidential election go on in Turkey, and Erdogan did not get to 50%.
Right.
He fell a little bit short, and this Kamal Kılıçdaroğlu or whatever. He was out there. I mean, he provided some stark. Here we go.
Thanks for giving us that name again, Bob, so
Yeah.
people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, Kılıçdaroğlu. I think it's just you don't even pronounce the G on the second part of his name or whatever.
Okay.
Like Erdogan. But yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's just, I mean, I guess he was about 5 percentage points ahead of the opposition. Now, and then there was a third guy who got about 5%. So they'll have a runoff. I think it was May 28th or thereabouts. It wouldn't take much for Erdogan to get over the hump, but on the other hand, does this also, the fact that this other guy came so close, does that embolden the opposition? And is Erdogan in trouble?
Well, we don't know what the guy with the 5% is going to do, because he
Right.
says he's still listening to both sides, and right. And so, I'm sure he's listening like this, got this ear inclined. So we'll see what happens on that. It is kind of interesting. I'd be surprised. I mean, it appears that Erdogan picked up momentum as the campaign went along. He was further behind than this until just the last week or so. So I wouldn't be surprised if he legit hangs on and does it. But there is this guy in the middle who is, is like a sort of a pro-freedom candidate, a Christian conservative type of party, I believe. And I don't know about Christian, because Islamic Republic at this point. What he wants to do is to make it unreligious, make it what's the word? I can't think of the word. So remove the religious laws and quit treating it that way and treat it as a normal country like the U.S. And he's the guy with the 5%. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually, I mean, to what even Bob's saying, that just the thing is that I think a lot of people thought Erdogan would actually do worse than he did, considering that the economy stinks really there. And then then they had that huge earthquake on the border that also caused a lot of devastation and death. And
he didn't get high marks for his response at all.
Yeah, and so in many ways, he should have been somewhat a little bit like the walking wounded, but he managed to rally enough support that, and I think you talked about, I think he probably picked up steam towards the end. So, I mean, he doesn't need that much to get him over the finish line. I mean, it wouldn't even take many of the supporters of this other guy to decide, okay, I've got the two guys, I'm just going to go with the president because, he may not be the greatest, but he's more of a known quantity for me or whatever. When you're that close to getting your 50%, it's pretty hard to see him not actually retaining the presidency.
Yeah,
at this point. But I don't know. It's interesting because I mean, Thailand also had an election, and this upstart party, gained a lot of seats in their parliament. But the problem, they face is that, I think this guy, he's young and he's charismatic. Is that for him, aspirations of being elected the prime minister out of that parliament is going to be near impossible, even though they control the most seats in parliament of any one party, because the military more or less controls the Senate side of it, and all they have to, they can it would take a lot for this other guy to cobble together enough support to overcome and win enough votes to become the prime minister. So, there's a movement afoot, but I don't know that it's more than a movement afoot, and whether or not they're going to be able to affect radical change, except it may have shaken up the establishment a little bit. We see this, we see this all over Europe, and we get these other parties come in, and they kind of upset the norm, but a lot of times they just don't hold on. They fizzle.
Right. There's a lot of value to the two-party system. We get a lot of criticism about it in the United States, and you get to a point where like this presidential election, it's setting up to be a guys with the weapons win. That's
pretty much it.
A lot of places. That's true USA too, by the way. Let's get a president who was voted out of office and a president who has failed in office running against each other. So this will be an election where people go, well, we wish we had a third choice. And, I gotcha. But the fact is, it works a lot better with only two, right? Because you have to come to two consensus on what it ought to look like. And those are negotiable, right? Within the party and then with the other party of what the vision for the country will be, right? If you're talking about 5 or 7 or 8, you can't get on that one vision as easily. And the factions of the parties just become parties. And here in our case, the factions have to work together. So you do get a leavening, right? So people trash the two-party system, but it's actually one of the real genius things that has happened in America.
Yeah, I mean, what's the net effect of a John Anderson, Ralph Nader, Ross Perot running? I mean, in the end.
Yeah, that's right. They lose, and they usually take out the candidate that looks sort of mostly like them, right? The one that they probably would have voted for if they weren't running themselves.
Yeah, I still think about Ross Perot. I mean, he did, all his charts and everything he attracted a lot of attention, but we got Bill Clinton.
Right.
So, but and for whatever that was worth in the end.
Might well have gotten Bill Clinton anyway.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there's no doubt that Bush was not in the greatest shape, either. So I'm not completely convinced that Ross Perot is the reason that Bill Clinton became president. But he definitely hurt. He probably hurt Bush more than he hurt Clinton. But who knows what those Perot people? Who knows who they would have voted for anyway?
Right.
You're voting for Perot.
It's the same as Trump in that it's a lot of people who entered the political system only to vote for that guy.
Yeah.
So when you say, okay, well, you could have offered him this candidate or that candidate, they would not have found that acceptable, right? Yeah. It's like what DeSantis is up against now is that all these people are in this thing. They'll vote for Trump. They're not going to vote for him. He's not the closest to Trump. He's not Trump. He's not going to get their vote.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that Trump has going for him on the voting side, is just that, the huge amount of people who voted for him, didn't get enough to win the second time around. But there's no doubt there are people who are attracted to Trump and his message that would not have voted otherwise.
Yeah, and he did not win, but he got more votes than any sitting president ever, and more votes than any Republican ever, and the second most votes ever, right?
Yeah,
and 11 million more than he got the time before.
Right, and I think that record will stand. I don't, only Trump could break that record at this point. There isn't a Republican presidential candidate who could probably do any better on the vote side,
exactly.
Total number of votes than Donald Trump for whatever that is worth at this point. But it'll be an interesting thing as we go down the line. Oh, I didn't spell his name. I knew I left it. So we had these primary elections yesterday all over the place. So this attorney general, right, in Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, he beat out a whole slew of candidates. He's now the nominee to go up against Governor Bashir, who's a very popular Democrat in Kentucky. Not impossible to bring down, but it'll take a lot.
Well, he's had some scratches in this term. His
Yeah.
COVID policy and his school reopenings and so forth. So Cameron has a lab chance here to win.
Yeah, I mean he's an attractive candidate, I think, and to do this, I think he may surprise some people. Come November, now it's a question to make sure that Kentuckians, Republicans really throw their support and really put together a good campaign. Incumbents always have plenty of money and plenty of support, so Cameron needs to just do this. The Republican Party has been a little bit too fractured over the years in terms of uniting behind a candidate, and then we wind up losing these critical races.
Kentucky's had some bizarre battles, internecine battles, and so that's what they needed. Like I guess DeSantis endorsed Kelly Craft. The consultants sort of liked her. She finished third, not even second. So the power of Trump exceeds the power of consultant class Republicans in Kentucky right now. But the consultant class Republicans cannot undermine this candidate, right? They need to shut up if you can't support.
Yeah, apparently, I guess DeSantis did that really right at the very end. I guess she was really reaching out to try to save that. She self-funded her campaign, I guess, for the most part. She's got a lot of money, but I think Cameron was just, he was just going to be too tough to beat at that point in time. And yeah, they need to do that. I mean, you look at Mitch McConnell and all the battles he's faced every time he goes up for re-election. Last few elections, it's just that the guy does what Kentuckians in general would want him to do, and he's a master politician. But they keep throwing people up against him. Think, oh, we can do better than this. But it's hard to imagine. I mean, you lose a guy like McConnell who's really steered the party. Not everybody loves him, and he's had his ups and downs. But he's kind of that steadying hand for the party, and whether or not he's majority leader or minority leader, that type of thing. He's done a pretty solid job for the Republicans overall. But it's Kentucky. Sometimes they just like, oh, well, we can do better. We got to find somebody else. Yeah. And and that time will eventually come. I mean, Mitch is what, like 81 now, so there'll be a time when he will either lose or decline to run again.
Right. Could be closer than you think.
Right. Could be much closer than you think. Philadelphia, not much of a surprise there. I mean, I think there were at least 7 Democrats vying to replace the Philadelphia mayor, who's a Democrat. He's termed out, so they'll get another liberal Democrat in there. But apparently, I guess the most progressive Bernie Sanders AOC candidate was not the winner, at least. So maybe that's some solace a little bit there. But it seemed like, when I looked at the candidates, I mean, they're all looking at this issue of crime and all these things like, hello, you're in a Democrat city, you're gonna fight crime. Exactly what, are you, what's the difference in your policy versus your predecessors to fight the crime in your city? Hello.
Well, this lady actually said she would hire cops.
That's true. She was going
to. I think that may have been what set her apart. Is that she said she would hire cops, and that this was it was something we needed to do. It needed to be a priority for the city. Philadelphia's in bad shape. It's not just street crime. It's like you have these long stretches of these big city streets that are nothing but drunks and drug addicts laid out there. All that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, look, I keep thinking about San Francisco. I mean, I had this notion in my head. I was like, that years ago, I think it would have been fun to take my wife on a short trip to San Francisco. We go and do some of the sites in San Francisco, but now I'm afraid to go there. That the city's a disaster. I mean, COVID didn't help because it emptied out the downtown with a lot of office space, right? There's
Right.
not a lot of back to work going on anywhere in the country for the most part. So you have that, but then, you have all this homeless stuff going on there. And then just, all these smash and grabs and the crime. And we see all the retail establishments are saying, we're done. We're moving to the suburbs. We're just closing up shop here. And it's starting to hollow out San Francisco's downtown core. That's not good. I mean,
Yeah.
the city has struggled to figure out how to solve this problem. Though I think the mayor's trying, but just is overwhelmed at this point. I mean, and the other politicians are not helping in San Francisco.
Right, because they don't. I mean, they don't want the problem solved. They're for this, so which is kind of odd, but they are, and so you have to look at it from that standpoint. The people, it always makes me laugh. Democrats always go, Republicans. These people are voting against their best interests. Like, how do you know what our best interests are, right? But this doesn't seem to be in their best interest to keep electing these pro-crime, anti-prosecution people, but that's what they do. So, it's like they say at Alcoholics Anonymous, until you've truly bottomed out, you're not ready to change, right? So they haven't bottomed out. You got to wait for them to bottom out.
Yeah, it's
It'll happen. I mean, it happened in New York. John Lindsay came along, and then he went away, and it happened again. Rudy came along, and he's gone away, and now, pretty soon you'll be looking at another law and order mayor in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I think Adams is, coming from the law enforcement side, he understands things, but it's being the mayor of New York is that.
Well, I mean, you have to be strong enough to rise above that bureaucracy, because that bureaucracy is definitely trying to tear you down. You're right about that. But it's like, can you stand apart from that? I mean,
yeah, and I mean,
Rudy did it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that's what it is. I mean, I think Adams, he needs to have that kind of Rudy mold, and just like, look, I don't care what that city council or whatever they're calling themselves. Go and you got to do the policies and do what's right for New York and protect those citizens, protect the businesses and things like that.
Right.
And don't allow them to throw down all these rules, regulations, laws that handcuff you, that reduce the police presence and police force, and just create this homeless / lawlessness issue that chases away tourists, which are a huge part of your economy.
Right. So we were talking about this, this guy, Jordan Cherry, right? You've heard about this. So he goes on the subway and he is attacking this woman. He's pulling her hair. He's screaming at her. He's threatening her life. And a dude gets up and says, "No more. You're not going to do that anymore." And puts him in a chokehold, and the guy dies subsequently in the chokehold, right? Or, allegedly from the chokehold or so forth. Okay, so, now they want to charge him with murder. And it's really not the citizen's job to kill people in the name of preventing the mugging of another person, or the beating or assault or whatever of another person, but that's what happened. But the thing about it is like, people are blaming this guy. They're blaming white supremacy, and they're blaming the Marine Corps and all this kind of stuff because the guy's a Marine, but what it actually is like New York set this guy up for this by letting him get away with it. The first time he did this, he probably wasn't as crazy about it as he was that day, but no one stood up. They'd say, "Oh, wow, I can just terrorize people I want because no one's going to do anything because they're afraid of me." So they play on the fears. They attack whoever they want to attack with impunity. And somebody finally stood up and said, "No." Okay, so, I wish the guy had been able to tell when Sherry got in trouble and turned him loose before he died. But the fact is, a lot of people are, fed up with having to put up with that guy and his ilk and the people that he brings on the trains, and the people who join him on the trains and harassing people. If you want people to use these public spaces, then, the police have obligation to get in there and stop stuff like this.
Yeah. I mean, this case, this is still, kind of a result of decades of liberal policies all across the country to take the mentally ill and try to mainstream them and put them into the public, square in essence. Um, I still,
We weren't in the right place before, right? So
well,
the people were being taken off the streets, and horrible things were happening to people in mental hospitals and so forth, right? So there was a problem there. To be fair to them, that didn't need to be addressed. Okay, but what we have done is we said, since we couldn't get mental hospitals right in the '60s, we'll just abandon the whole idea, and the people in the mental hospitals could just take to the streets, and whatever happens, happens. And that's what you have going on, And so these people, they're mentally ill. They can't work. They can't support themselves. Their families have disappeared on them for various reasons. And, who wouldn't, why wouldn't you turn to drugs and crime and whatnot and depravity and sleeping on a street? You have nothing else. So it's either we deal with the mental health issues, or we let those people stay on the streets, and we accept that there are streets that we either A, can't use, or B, will have to use, knowing you could be accosted by crazy drug addicts at any moment.
Yeah, no, it's, you're right in that sense. It's just like, we had St. Elizabeth's here, and I will not defend, these mental hospitals, from the 50s and 60s and even 70s, in terms of probably, how things were done is, just straight off institutionalizing people was not the right method, but to release them and not put support, mechanisms in place to help them to, you can't just put them out on the street and think that they're going to be fine,
Right.
and that others will help them. And, I saw it firsthand in DC when, when they started releasing people from St. E's, we had a guy right by the old AIM office on 14th Street. And he would stand in the middle of the intersection at 14th and H, and he would try to direct traffic in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
had another guy, because at that time, back in the 80s, that part of 14th Street still had kind of their red light district, had a lot of,
Right.
questionable, the adult bookshops and the bathhouses and
Strip
shows
bars,
and all that kind of stuff, right on the block, right next up from the office. But I still remember a guy, he came and he smashed out all the windows of the adult, bookstore across the street, catty corner to where our office was. These people needed help, and they didn't get the help. Like this unfortunate guy who died, he also needed more help. There's things that the system did not provide with him for him. And Bob's saying, American hero, he was protecting others.
right?
And when it's unfortunate that this guy died, but the thing is that you charge him with manslaughter or whatever, and you make him out to be this criminal. There are going to be other incidences. This
Right.
is
You're telling everybody that rides a train to just, you see someone getting beaten to death, just walk away, because we're not going to help you.
Yeah, there's that phrase that goes around, right? See something, say something, kind of almost like do something. This won't happen. They may see it, but at best they might actually turn their phone off and film it and try to go viral with it for their own sake. But they're not going to do anything. People are not going to help other people at all when you do this.
Right. That's right. It's awful.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation with this. All right, so now we're at the part where I think you're going to love it. It's the Durham report. We've been waiting for this for, it seems, forever. It was pretty devastating, but the liberals are just stewing about it.
Yeah, so the Durham report comes out, and what it basically says is that the FBI started this investigation knowing it had no evidence. Like they started. And he said, one of the, I think the most disingenuous thing I've seen about this, he said, they had there's a preliminary investigation, and then there is an actual what they call a full investigation. Okay, so preliminary, they heard that George Papadopoulos was drunk in a bar and said something to some Australian guy overheard allegedly about the people in the Trump campaign reaching out to Russians. Okay. So that's there. We had enough evidence to start a preliminary campaign, and that's what a preliminary investigation. That's what Ted Lieu said. Well, the report says you had enough to start a preliminary investigation, but they never started a preliminary investigation. They went straight to full on, right? Because they didn't care. They knew the evidence wasn't right anyway. They were trying to get Trump. So they were exposed for doing exactly what people like us have been saying they were doing this entire time, which was concocting the whole story, the entire story, suit to nuts, to get rid of Trump, to knock him out of the 2016 presidential election, to ensure his defeat. The whole Mueller investigation was after he won to try to make him politically nuclear for the 2020 election, right? The whole thing was politically motivated. There was never any criminal facts behind it. Then you still have people coming out, well, he really was, hooked up with the Russians. Well, no, he wasn't really hooked up with the Russians, right? They spent, 4 years. They spent 3 years. They spent, they had 50 FBI agents dedicated to this. They had 19 Hillary donating attack dog lawyers. They reviewed 50 million documents in conjunction with this. If it was there, it would have been found. It wasn't found because it was not there. He was not guilty. He was falsely accused. And this has been determined. Now, what do you do about that? That's the question. The Democrats say nothing. Hey, nobody got charged. Like, right. We've gone past where anybody can be charged. It worked. Your thing of bottling this up until it could do no real damage worked. But the names don't change. We know who did these things. Right. We know who. That's right. That's right. That's right. They know that. They know they were caught red-handed. Andrew Weissman is on Twitter today screaming like a stuck pig because that he got caught. His reputation is in tatters and well should be. And the other thing that's happening here is that's very important is going after Trump for the sake of going after Trump is going out of style. It was the fashionable thing to do for a long time. Letitia James was our queen and Alvin Bragg was our king. And the Willis down in Georgia, we can hardly wait till she comes up with what she comes up with. And it now has been exposed as, all you're doing is trying to get Trump by whatever means necessary. And you don't care about truth, right? Because that's what the Durham report said. And so I think the whole country's got to look at all the efforts to get Trump and think, okay, I think I know what they're really doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just as Bob said too. I mean, leftist blinders fully in place.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just. I mean,
Mueller has admit, their whole thing falls apart if they admit.
Yeah, no, I mean,
what did Jake Schaller say? Jake Tapper. Jake Schaller's a friend of mine. Jake Tapper said is, this exonerates Trump. Right. So they were right that the Democrats were lying about all this and that there was no there, and Trump is exonerated. And of course, the lefties are all furious at him now, but that he's right.
No, I mean, he was the one guy who was actually being honest about it. Right. I mean, in terms of that, I mean, definitely far more honest and forthwith, than the White House, where, they're just ducking, they don't want that question. They don't want to answer any questions related to this at all.
Right. She's flatly refused to answer. She's like, that's got to come from Justice Department. Somebody else asked it. Like, we're not speaking to that here. The president has said that he wants honesty. So that's what we have is honesty. I'm like, I don't think so, buddy.
Yeah, such honesty and such transparency. I was trying to remember what was the title of James Comey's book? Wasn't it something didn't have to do with honesty or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so glad you mentioned that. Comey is singled out here as the most duplicitous person involved. Right? I mean, the biggest purveyor of untruth for political gain came from Comey. Right. And a lot of it has also happened under Chris Wray. It's time to get rid of Chris Wray. It's time to start some serious house cleaning at the FBI.
So it was a higher a higher loyalty. Was that the one
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that was his first one anyway? So yeah, it's yeah, loyalty to what?
yeah. Just to the Democrat Party. I
That's
mean,
right. Yeah, right. I mean, it's like, yeah, yeah, just this whole thing brings out all those uncomfortable truths because then you have to say it's like, as you mentioned. I mean, Hillary Clinton. I mean, you think about the Steele dossier and all this stuff, all this duplicitous stuff that has gone on there, and the Democrats. This is terrible. It's been fun for Trump though, right? I mean, he's
right.
he's having a great time with this.
Yeah, he's kicking them around. Yeah, that's right. That had a lot to do with it.
But yeah, that's been kind of interesting on that. Yeah, another thing that's come up since we last met too was Title 42 expired, and so we've had this border situation going on there. Biden sent 1,500 extra troops down there. The mayor of El Paso was bracing for things. It's been interesting because I guess some immigrant, some of these illegals think that they're a little concerned about what paperwork they may have to provide, and others are saying it's open borders and we're coming through. But I mean, our immigration policy is kind of an abject mess now.
Well, what the Biden administration is trying to do is go back to the Trump policy because Trump didn't rely on Title 42. Trump just said, you have your asylum hearings on the other side of the border, right? Unless it looks like you have a claim, right? Because most of these people, U.S. law, you can't get asylum status here just because your economic situation is bad, right? You have to prove you're being persecuted, or there's a good chance you would be persecuted by your home government if you returned, right? That's a difficult lift. Most people leave in Honduras or wherever. The government's not trying to do anything to them. They want a better life. Okay, if you want to change immigration law to say, okay, we're going to take in X amount of people who just want a better life. Okay, that's fine. Let's go to Congress and get that bill passed, and we can do that. But right now, what the law says, and it's probably right, is asylum, that category for letting people come into the country, is reserved for people who legitimately fear persecution if they return home. There's other ways to get people into the country. We can expand legal visas. We can expand low skill visas. We can beef up visa overstay enforcement so that people are more comfortable letting in people on visas. We could do temporary work programs like the old Bracero program. Bring them in during, picking season, to do the harvest season, to do the harvest. There's all kind of stuff that all could be negotiable, and that there is bipartisan support, e-verify, so forth, right? There's a variety of measures that if you get people in the room, they could agree to, okay? But it all starts with you must close the border. You must get control of the border. And until we do that, and until we admit that needs to be the priority, it's not going to get any better, right? And they're still trying to say, it's not humane for us to demand people to say why they want to come in the country. And it's like, yeah, it is. That's what people do. They don't just let anybody walk in who wants to walk in, especially given all the national security risks now.
Yeah. So, I mean, how's our borders, our Kamala doing here these days?
Well, she has nothing to do with it, which is probably not. She's been moved to artificial intelligence. So
we can go down so many.
We go from everything being all good at the border to now everything being all good with artificial intelligence. So, that's kind of scary stuff. You realize one of the guys at Google, one of the founders of Google, quit the company over what it's doing with AI. Right? They're starting to get.
I mean, yeah, he felt that he had to quit that so he could talk about the AI and some of the dangers of AI and things like that. Because people have been falling over themselves, on this AI thing, as if it's like the next, it's the savior. It's going to do so much, but there are a lot of concerns and a lot of issues with AI that you better watch out for that. It's not the perfect solution. at this point.
Yeah, all right. I'll give you an example. So the Trump tax cuts are being debated as part of this budget debate, right? So the left's line is the tax cuts hurt the Treasury. If we just repeal the tax cuts, the shortages will go away, the debt ceiling will take care of itself, and so forth. Okay, the tax cuts, we set a record on revenue collection in 2020. We broke that record in 2021. Then in 2022, we put 12% more on that record. We broke that record by 12%, which is an enormous amount in 1 year to break your revenue record, right? So it's not that we're not taking in revenue, right? It's that, it's the predictable, you cut taxes, especially corporate taxes, right? All these corporations across the world repatriated trillions of dollars to the U.S. economy. So there are a lot more people here making money. Therefore, there's a lot more tax money coming into the government. Okay. So when you calculate, like if we do a tax increase or a tax cut, what will be the economic impact, right? There's been this long fight in the country over, shouldn't those results, like we have gotten with the Trump tax cut, the fact that cutting taxes, the same thing in the Reagan tax cuts, significant, especially in that way, where corporations benefited, big money benefited. It wasn't just giving taxpayers back a couple of $100, but like all across the board, people benefited. Okay, so we have a lot of examples of doing that and it being very successful in terms of generating more revenue and helping the economy. Okay, but what AI does, okay, so from now on, when we ask the questions of these, what will happen if we have a 8% tax cut and we plug it into the system, right? And the answer is not going to come back reflecting those results, because those results are not politically convenient to the people who are setting up the algorithm, right? To Google and the left and so forth, right? So, when you say, okay, if we cut taxes by $300, what will that do to the deficit? Well, it raises $300, you idiot. Well, no, we know that, it will set off a whole bunch of other economic things that will probably mean more money for the public till, right? For the public treasury. But that will never be factored into the answer that they are trying to get us bound to live by, because the answer that favors low taxes won't be allowed into the algorithm, which produces the artificial intelligence. Right.
Right. I mean, I think that's part of it. It's just that, the AI, learns from the data it's given. Right.
Right.
And so if
you don't give it that data that serves the right cause, all you give it is data that serves leftist policy goals, every time it's going to recommend leftist policy goals. It's all it knows.
Right. Right. I mean, and the problem now, I mean, it's just, we know our tax collections, the revenue is down. I mean, part of this is
our revenue is way up.
Well, the tax collections this past April were down from the last few years. I mean, we had set records, but this is one of the reasons that the debt ceiling deadline set by Yellen, has moved up, has been January or is June 1st. Is because they're not bringing in as much tax revenue right now as they used to. I mean, there's the economy slowed down. The capital gains, that people were picking up before. The stock market has not been very good. So there's fewer people cashing in on a lot of different things here, and it's doing that. And I don't think that was in the government's model to do that. They tend to think, oh yeah, we're going to continue to see these trends, these positive trends. But this administration doesn't really know how to handle basic economics, and so as a result, they're putting themselves in a real pickle here. And we've got a debt ceiling issue where they want a short-term debt solution so they can kick the can down the road, and they don't want to, because they don't want the Republican plan. Republican plan is not that it's necessarily cutting spending; they're actually increasing some spending, but it's trying to slow it down. And the Democrats don't want to slow down spending.
Yeah, they don't want not one penny.
No.
Everything, we must continue to be at least as irresponsible as we have been to this point, right? If not more, right? And that's their stance, and they're like, they want to make it. That's our fault. The Republicans passed legislation right? The Democrats was, oh, no cuts. It's like, no, you're not going to get this with no cuts because the legislation says there's going to be cuts. So, we can figure this out together, or, we can sit and let the clock run out. Here's the thing about this, okay? So, there's two things going on here. One is, that goes to the AI and a whole bunch of other stuff. The left is trying to make it where when you ask the great questions, right, about science, tax policy, public policy of all kinds, the only answers available to you are leftist answer, right? You cannot no longer access the answers from the right, right? They're being through AI and all these other things. They're culling those answers out. They're not allowed anymore. You're not allowed to say anything, bad about, point out that there's been no global warming in almost 9 years now, right? You're not allowed to say things like that anymore. So, they're trying to make it where, access to both sides of the story is not possible, right? All you can hear is our side. The other thing they're trying to make it is, we're never changing at all. We're never going 1 inch in your direction. And then we're going to call you bad for compromise, right? So, no, you're going to compromise this time, right? Always before in these debt ceiling things, the Republicans do something, the Democrats do something, they dig in, they wait. The deadline comes. People start saying, oh, the deadline's here. Oh, no, the park is closed and the people are being laid off. And this way, okay, American people don't want it. We got to fold, right? But this time, the big business groups, the Chamber of Commerce, those guys, they're going to the Democrats and they're saying, McCarthy, what's he want to maintain no more than 1% increase or something like that? That's the massive cuts they're talking about. They're saying, hey, McCarthy's got a point. You deal with him, come up with something you can live with, and you can claim victory, and he can claim victory. But we're not going to push him to fold to you.
Yeah, you can't tell me that the Democrats in the Senate can't, because they've done this for time and more, to go through and then come up with something that they to compromise on, send that back so they can conference on it and fix this thing and do it, because they've done it forever. They they for some reason they've dug in their heels. They think they can make the Republicans the boogeyman on this or whatever, and put all the blame on them. But the Democrats control the White House and they control the Senate. So hello. This is on you right now. The Republicans in the House, they did their job. They gave you something to work with.
That's right.
Work with it instead of having this. No, we're not talking. I mean, the House and the Senate are only in joints. They're only going to be around for simultaneously for about another week. Based on the calendar. Let's do something. But it's the Democrat. They've been very lackadaisical about trying to sit down and have these talks.
Because they think they will win by waiting.
Yeah, I think they think the Republicans are going to fold on. I think McCarthy's. He's held firm so far, so good for him.
Yeah. I think he will, and I think his members are behind him, and I think their voters are behind them. It's a contest of nerves, and there'll come a moment when it looks like you're really fighting a little bit uphill, but I think Americans understand that doing this again with zero attention paid to cutting spending is not wise, and it's not doable. It's time. You got to have to attack the spending side.
All right. Time to wrap it up. Last word.
What do we have on here that we have not? I want to say a bit about the CNN, the reaction to, CNN has taken a huge beating from the left over having Trump on this town hall, right? So he's on, what was he on there? An hour and a half, maybe? Yeah. And, their whole thing is like, you got to have a reporter on there asking tough questions, interviewing, challenging every word he says. Well, that's not what you would do if Biden was there. You'd just let Biden talk, because this toughness thing only matters to Trump, right? It only matters when you're talking to Trump. You don't have to be tough with any other politicians, just Trump, right? Because he's the one who lies. Right. So, they've taken all this thing, and all they're trying to do, is they're behind Newsmax now. They're really starting to, bottom out as a TV network. And, that was their best night in months and months and months. Right. So, they're trying to do something about that. And they're trying to be the news source that is not left-wing hackery, right? It's like this thing, Durham report comes out, and Nicole Wallace is like, well, it clears the Democrats of everything. It's like, that's a bald-faced lie, Nicole. You know better than that, right? It makes the Democrats look really bad, and no, they're not going to get criminally charged, because we all know that's not the way things work in the U.S. anymore. But and I know, and she knows that what got revealed in that report was very, very bad for them. It destroyed trust in institutions that Americans have to be able to trust. The CIA, the FBI, we can't really watch what they do. We don't even get to see their budget. Their budget's approved in private, right? The CIA, at least, right? So, if we're going to trust Congress to be the only one who knows about them, and them to be the only one who tells us anything about what they're doing, right? We don't really get to report on it or anything because it's secret, right? Then we have to be able to trust you not to put your name on letters, attesting to the innocence of people are not innocent, right? We have to be able to trust that you will only begin investigations when you have real verifiable evidence. We have to be able to trust that what you say to judges to get FISA warrants is true, right? And right now we're in a position where none of that is true. So, there's a lot of talk about defunding the FBI. I could see defunding CIA. I don't think that'll go too far because it's kind of hard to replace. But, it's time for the American people to get control of those institutions.
All right. And with that, we will wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for joining us again this week. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world, and do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America. We're off next week, so we will see everybody in 2 weeks. Have a great week.